Gospel according to St. Matthew chapter 25.
Glory to you, Lord.
God's kingdom is like 10 young virgins who took oil lamps and went out to greet the bridegroom. 5 were silly and 5 were smart. The silly virgins took the lamps but no extra oil. The smart virgins took the jars of oil to feed their lamps. The bridegroom didn't show up when they expected him, and they all fell asleep. In the middle of the night, someone yelled out, "The bridegroom's here, go out and greet him." The 10 virgins got up and got their lamps ready. The silly virgins said to the smart ones, "Our lamps are going out. Lend us some of your oil." They answered, "There might not be enough to go around. Go buy your own." They did, but while they were out buying oil, the bridegroom arrived. And everyone who was there to greet him had gone into the wedding feast. The door was locked. Much later, the virgins, the silly ones, showed up and knocked on the door, saying, "Master, we're here, let us in." He answered, Do I know you? I don't think I know you. So stay alert. You have no idea when he might arrive. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. Do I know you? That'd be an interesting phrase to hear when you knock at the door. Do I know who you are? What's the password? Who are you exactly? It's a parable. It's not a narration of the exact words of Jesus to someone else describing faith, but it's a parable, it's a story. It might have even been a joke at that time. You know, the 10 girls, 5 of them silly, 5 of them wise. And did you hear the one about them? You know, make sure that you're the smarter ones, the wiser ones. And you realize it's said to point to something critical about preparedness. The silly ones weren't lacking for oil. They had the money, they had the capacity. They just didn't do it. They didn't bother. And yet the wise ones had the capacity. They thought ahead. They did something related to the future. Last week we had a meeting right after this one. A lot of you stuck around. We had 88 votes positive for our building program, and we had no opposed. It's always a little spooky to have no opposed. So I hope that means we've done a good job of describing what it is and vetting it, and we really do have a magnificent team. If you're on the building team or worked in this whole building sequence, designing, planning, at any aspect of it, raise your hand right now, just so we see you. Some of you have done that. There are, see. Let's give them a round of applause. These people have worked hard at this, designing, thinking, planning, strategizing, and have brought together a really great plan. I think that's why it has your support. And it's also one that's needed. It's part of our preparedness. It's part of our thinking forward. And if you didn't get a chance to see the plans, just go to crownofglory.org, and the plans are there. There's also the capacity to donate there if somebody's so moved. But it is online under capital campaign or under building campaign. One of the take a look. Well, I want to talk about that first lesson a little bit. We'll come back to preparedness. And I come to Paul's words to a community that was emerging. They were just trying to figure out what it meant to be Christians in Christian community. And he says it was totally spontaneous. It was entirely their idea. He said, I didn't think of it. And it caught us completely off guard. It explains that this community, had first given themselves unreservedly to God. And then the other giving, whatever else they did, just flowed out of that. There's something non-coercive, there's something gentle, there's something that tugs at you in the middle of that. That when something happens in the community that's really of the Spirit, it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel put upon. People don't feel hopefully burdened by it or troubled by it. It's just all about life emerging out of our community in a direction that has life and has life. and has strength. That we're able to give life with it. A year ago, we started a process that decorated the sanctuary. Remember the leaves? And the leaves stretched. By the time we did leaves all year, pretty much. And we brought forward leaves that had to do with what do we love about Crown of Glory, what do we hope for, what gets in our way, what are we afraid of, what makes us happy, what gives us joy. And through our fall campaign, our giving campaign, as well as Lent, as well as opening Hearts, Hands, Home, that had to do with our building, we built and flowered these walls, and it was kind of fun. I was sad to see it come down. Dennis finally said, we got to do something with that. We got to pull it down. I said, well, what can we do? And then in researching that, Dennis found a website called Wordle. And he took your words, all your comments, and he put those in a file, and he sent them into Wordle, submitted them, and they came out this way. Basically, And if the words are larger in that image, it means it happened more often. If they're smaller, it happened quite a bit, but less often. And it was sort of a sorting and a prioritizing. It's a little impressionistic, but people, this just came out of you. It came out of your hearts. It came out of what you noticed about the congregation, what you valued about this community, what you value about your faith. I want you to open your bulletins now. Open your bulletins to that image. I hope you have enough light in the room, and I want you to look at that image and find 2 or 3 that surprise you, jump out at you, seem significant, that just seem important to you. I want you to pick 2 or 3 of them. Just look it over. See what jumps out at you. Now I want you to turn to a neighbor, somebody sitting near you. If you're not near somebody, go ahead and turn around so you can talk to somebody. Tell them what jumped out at you. Tell them what jumped out at you. If you got a comment about it, that's great, no pressure. If this freaks you out, you can just sit and meditate on it. So as you made comments, what jumped out at you? How many of you things jumped out at you having to do with family or community? That's big. How many things having to do with faith, God, peace, spirit, those kind of things? How many of you about service sort of things that stretch you out beyond the community? How many had to do with Bible, reminding, memory, faith, being better, belonging, sense of belonging? Some of you resonate with that. A lot of people understand church. Excuse me, I'll put my mic on. A lot of people understand church as a combination of believing and belonging. That we have beliefs that we bring to church and to our faith community, and that those are important. But they're not the only thing. There's also a deep sense of belonging to each other. And what it means to belong to the greater church, to belong to Christ, to belong to relationships that are important to us, that are precious, that sense of belonging. Sometimes that comes ahead of believing. Some people come to faith communities because they just need a sense of belonging, and the believing is kind of a side trip for them. Some come because absolutely faith is at the center of it, and that believing draws them, and they just put up with the community, and say, yeah, that's fine, that goes along with it, but I love sharing the believing. A lot of people in the midst of 5 or 10 years in a congregation or in a community life come to enjoy both, and the way both of them come together. That sometimes I come for your belief. Your belief lifts mine and gives me a sense of belonging in the midst of everything that we do. He talks about finishing up. He says, you do so many things well. And listen to the belief he has in this community and the gifts that he sees. He says, you're articulate, you're insightful, you're passionate. You love us. Now do your best in this too. And he talks about finish well. Finish what you do. Keep striving ahead. I think of how much we live in an instant gratification world. If I want something, I want to pull up to a window, I want it quick. Pharmacy, food, whatever it is, just pull up and have it quickly. We could just do drive-up church, that might do really fine. If it lasts about 7 minutes, I could just do it in between all the really important stuff, that I have to do. In fact, one of the beautiful things about church is like wasting time with God and the community. Just come and set aside all your to-do lists and just waste a little time, because sometimes it's into that kind of setting that God does powerful work, rearranging your priorities a little bit, rearranging your heart and your being. But he says, finish well. Be people of endurance and perseverance. Be people that commit to something that we keep working out through life, decade after decade, year after year, month after month. Not just how can I get a quick religious buzz this week or next, but how do I serve well and more deeply engage the people around me and the community around me and what we care about and what we live into. Paul was into that. He was into the long term. People think long term about what we build. Finish what you started. He said you can do what you can, but don't do what you can't. I thought, isn't that an interesting thing? People, do what you can, don't do what you can't. We could say that with anything. And that is, don't get hung up on what you can't do. Some people start living their life under the shadow of all the things they can't quite do, until they've created such a list, such an incredible list, that it weighs their heart down and their mind down, until they can hardly move, and people are paralyzed by all their missed opportunities, missed capacities, by all that they're lacking. He said, you're only put on this planet to do what you can, not what you can't. He said, keep striving with what you can. When that pours out of you, not by compulsion and not by force, but when that just comes forward in life for what you see as good and lasting and true, powerful things are going to happen. Do what you can, not what you can't. And then he paints this picture of this remarkable economy. People have all sorts of economic theories. The Bible has all sorts of economic theories. They may not match your political ones. They may not match your wishes, your desires, your hopes, and your dreams, but they're powerful, and they are there. You didn't make them up. But he says, your surplus, he says, do what you can, not what you can't. And then he says, you're shoulder to shoulder with those who are near you. Your surplus matching their deficit, their surplus matching your deficit. In the end, you'll come out even. The goal in life is to come out even. We all go away from life with the same thing we came in, whether you are a billionaire or whether you are on food stamps. And he says, at the end of this great journey, you'll be in the same place with anyone else on the planet. Absolutely the same place. It's you and God. And you can play all the other games and all the other enterprises and all the other things that you want to do in your 70, 80, 90 years. But when it comes down to it, it all balances out. It will be the same. Realize that. And he said that's the grace of a community, where people share, where people are mindful of each other, where we nurture our sense of enterprise and opportunity, but we also realize that's not the last word in God's love. Where we understand that the distribution of life and care and goods in this world, it has all sorts of other means that you believe in and you hope for and hope do a good job, but ultimately God has ways of redistributing life, and God will have the last word. That's just the way it will be. When you dial the clock forward 100 years or 1,000 years, or to the end of your life, you come into life with exactly what you believe. What are you going to do in the meantime? What's really meaningful now? What's really significant now? What will make the difference? And when your head rests on that pillow, what will make the difference in how your heart is full? And how you feel not only full, but complete, that you fulfilled the journey well. And he has a picture that we fulfill it for each other. We bring what we need, we bring also what we lack, and it will all balance out. And in God's kingdom and God's economy, that will work out. Let's talk about preparedness. Just to turn a corner, it's not necessarily about God's economy, but it's about how we live that economy. And he talks about the 5 silly girls and the 5 wise girls. We're glad there's wise girls there too, and we know a lot of wise ones around here. And that wisdom was that they were prepared, that they thought ahead. And the silly ones didn't really quite think ahead. They just launched into the event. It's like heading out on a run without a canteen. It's like without a beverage. It's like doing a lot of things that we do, though we compensate for it. And you think of what it means to be prepared, and sometimes when people think of being prepared, we think of our scout days. How many of you were Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Brownies, something like that? And the motto was, be prepared. And part of being prepared was knowing your knots. It was having a scout knife. I always loved the scout knives, that had all our little gadgets on it. Like you could accomplish anything. You put back together a device or whatever it was. And just the idea that we wanted to be people who were resourceful enough when something happened, we'd have something to do. Some way of fudging things together. And that if we found ourselves stranded in the wilderness, we'd at least have enough sense to not eat the poisonous stuff. And what are some sure bets that we could survive off of it? I'm not so sure we learned it that well, but it was a great goal. It was a great goal being prepared. So sometimes it was really being prepared for disasters and trying to avert them. A book showed up on my doorstep, and it was what to do in cataclysmic circumstances. If you're falling out of an airplane or if you're doing whatever. It was like how people have survived on this. And my first impulse was, I got to read this book. If I memorize all these, and then you start thinking about the odds of them happening. It's like 1 in a million for these. What to happen when the lightning strikes, or when, I shouldn't say that. Maybe someone of you has been struck by lightning. But part of what I'm trying to say is that we spend a lot of preparedness trying to avert disaster. Preparedness is also preparing for blessing. It's also preparing for the amazing things that can happen for people who share their lives and share their hearts and share of themselves and give themselves so deeply that community that they're a part of, that faith community that they're part of, becomes a beacon, not just for them and their children and future generations, but for the whole community around them. For people who are lacking, people who are struggling, people who are wounded, people who are broke, people who are disturbed, people who have more stuff than they know what to do with, but they don't know where real life is, people who don't know what they're hungry for. They just have a general appetite for something. They're trying to find what in life makes them feel rich and full and complete. And we are a community of people who lift up a teaching for a new way of seeing and living. That when people understand it, it's not about decimal points. And it's not about bank accounts. It's about people living into each other with a power and a capacity that drives us and holds us and carries us. I saw the movie Interstellar yesterday. Highly recommended. Takes about 3 hours. Matthew McConaughey was the star of it, and I think does a really good job. But it is one of those movies that may sound like a goofy, science fiction sort of thing, but it's got a powerful message about how people connect with each other. And I'm not going to spoil it by saying much more than that, but think of what draws us together and gives us meaning as people on this earth, in this community, in your families, in our churches, in our faith communities. We lift that up because we know that God intends far more than just averting disaster. That part of the fullness we feel is the full blessing of our baptism and our life together. The Lord be with you. Lord God, you shower into our lives an abundance in the whole community that we can hardly fully understand. And yet some still lack, some are troubled, some are hungry, some are disturbed, some are anxious, some have all the goods that they could imagine and yet don't have a happiness of spirit and joy. Sometimes we come to envy those with pure hearts and those with a sense of life that is drawn deeply from you and from the wellspring of your Spirit. Help us to be those people and to know the fullness of life that you have laid out before us. Help us to know what it means to give life, and to be life-giving to others. In your holy name.